Hi, everybody. Hope you're well. I'm Dr. Wendy Sue Swanson here to talk to you a little bit about how you feed your baby in 2020. It does seem a little dark, but I got to tell you, it's getting later in the year. I'm in Wisconsin. It just seems a little bit dark on the screen, but nice to see you. I'm excited for you in your journey of having a baby. If you've already had a baby, then your journey as you begin and think about feeding your baby. More than anything else, I think we know now how to feed a baby in a way that we really haven't known as well for decades. And I'll explain all about that. I'm a mom to two, so I have two boys who one just turned 12. So I'm kind of old now, and one is about to turn 14. And the other thing about that is that how we feed babies today and how we used to feed babies 12 and 14 years ago has really changed. And that's what's primarily different is not about organic, it's not about whole food, it's not about a first perfect food. It's really about protection against the development of food allergies. And that's why in some ways, I'm here today. I'm the chief medical officer of Spoonful One, which is a company looking at making it really easy for parents to get great diet diversity and all sorts of common allergens in their baby and toddlers' diets every single day, which I'll explain. So I practiced general pediatrics for 12 years, and then I've been working to translate health information around vaccines and safe sleep, and now really focusing on food allergies. As we know, with the science that's really come out in the last 4 to 5 years, that we have the ability to prevent and protect against food allergies unlike ever before. We know that each of the last decades, so since the 1970s, every single decade, so every 10 years, the number of children with a food allergy doubles, which is really staggering in some ways. And you can't explain it really from genetics alone. It's really likely a combination of our modern environment and then probably what we've been doing. And pediatricians like me, started in the year 2000. So about 20 years ago, we started to tell families not to eat things like peanut, not to eat things like egg, not to eat things like shellfish or fish or sesame early in a baby's life. And that was the wrong advice. And so I'm going to lay out just really what we know today and just kind of regular standard things about feeding your baby. So first and foremost, when you have a baby, and if you've already had one, I think we can feel a ton of peace when our babies are sleeping, which is hard because babies don't always sleep all that easily early on. And of course, when we are feeding our babies, if that's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, I think we feel really good as we nourish our kids. And I think that's just very innate and hardwired in who we are. So, as you're starting to think about feeding your baby right out of the gates, you'll hear so much support for breastfeeding, and for good reason you should. It's really good for mom's health. About 90% of moms who go out and attempt to breastfeed or want to breastfeed will be able to breastfeed. Now, that may not mean every single ounce of milk that your baby gets will come from breast milk. Some moms will actually use formula in addition to breast milk, but know that really 9 out of 10 moms who want to do it will be able to do it. Sometimes it works really effortlessly for a mom and baby parent. Sometimes it's really very difficult. I had a very difficult time with my first baby. I was a practicing pediatrician. I wanted so desperately to breastfeed him, and I had so many challenges, and I used lots of lactation consultants and got tons of advice. And in the end was able to partially breastfeed him and also formula fed him. And then my second, it was a totally different ballgame. Like the kid just popped out different. And, it was a different journey for me. And so, I think every mom and baby is a unique pair. And I think, each of us are unique and our life circumstances are too. So we love breast milk because it is a perfect food in some ways. And yet, it doesn't do everything when it comes to food allergy protection, for example. So breastfeeding your babies, when you're eating all sorts of diversity. You never want to, when you're pregnant, ever restrict the diversity of your diet. In fact, we want you to eat common allergens like nuts and fish in small quantities, of course, and sesame and soy and all the different tree nuts and peanut and egg and wheat and all those common foods that can be, typical allergens in children, especially. We want you to eat them when you're pregnant. And then after, when you're breastfeeding, you are, giving a little bit of everything you eat to your baby. But it's been found that not everybody, for example, if you eat a peanut butter sandwich, not every mom's breast milk will have elements of the peanut protein in the breast milk. So it's unfortunately true that breastfeeding alone is not protective against food allergies. So if you look at formula feeding moms and you look at breastfeeding moms, there isn't any difference. So there's no kind of kick or benefit. But breastfeeding is protective against a skin condition called eczema, which is the number one risk factor for a child developing food allergy. And that's kind of a dry rash. We can see it in about, 1 in 5 infants in this country. And the reason being is that we know that when you're kind of broken down skin or dry skin, like anything in the environment can kind of enter the skin, and babies are getting exposed to food then through their skin rather than just through their tummy. So we want babies to get exposed through their tummy. But, when you start out, you're feeding breast milk or formula, and either is great. And having been a mom who fed both, I'm just going to tell you that science is true. And as a pediatrician, I'll tell you that too. So you'll figure out kind of on your own way. We often do recommend supplemental vitamin D in the first year of life as well, particularly if, like me, you live in a northern climate. And also if you, have dark skin and don't have as good of absorption of vitamin D through the skin. But we recommend it for all mom-baby pairs, 400 international units of vitamin D every day. And then you'll get to this place where you'll be like, okay, well, when do I go from this totally liquid diet, which is kind of in the first few months of life, to a solid diet? And it's a journey for every mom and every baby. And ultimately it starts really around 4 to 6 months of age. And so there isn't a perfect day. It's really this combination of your baby showing you signs of readiness. And readiness can come in all sorts of forms. It comes with a combination of just gaining developmental milestones that your baby has to have to feed solid food, but then also kind of these social and emotional cues that you'll get that will be very obvious to you. So babies around 4 months of age, as they start to get ready to eat, they'll kind of like watch you eat pizza, or like smell super good, and they'll kind of eyeball your pizza while you're eating it, and they'll follow your eyes, in your mouth with that pizza back and forth with like each bite that you take. They'll lick the air, like literally like kind of go like this when they start to smell really good food, because they're like, I want some of that. Like, that smells good. And then, they'll ultimately start even opening their mouth if you cue them with something in your hand. So they'll get interested. They're learning every time they're watching you eat. They'll also need to show you some developmental milestones. So a baby really needs to have pretty decent head control. So, they're kind of bobbleheads when they're born. They're born out of a swimming pool where they did not have to hold their head up, and they've got this big bowling ball out there. And by about 4 months of age, a baby will do a pretty good job keeping their head up. In addition, if you sit your child in like a bumbo or a little assisted seat, or you put them on your lap, if you're kind of holding them up like this, you'll see that a baby has pretty good truncal stability. So they're able to kind of sit in a sitting position, not totally by themselves, but keep their trunk up. And that's to protect them just from a choking risk, even when you're actually feeding them sitting on your lap, or they're feeding sitting in a little like assisted chair or a high chair of some way. And then lastly, when you put a little bit of food into their mouth, they don't only and always have what's called the tongue thrust. So there's an innate reflex that babies are born with. If something goes in their mouth, they kind of spit it out like that. But you'll find around 4 to 5 months of age, babies will lose that reflex when you put something in. So if you've decided to start with your very first food and you put it in baby's mouth, they may kind of gum it as they explore the flavor and they explore the texture, but they shouldn't constantly take the food and just thrust it out of their mouth. If they do that, then you just want to wait a few days and try again. Once they can keep it in their mouth, they'll kind of push it to the back of their mouth and they'll swallow it that way, and you're off and running. And all sorts of families will ask me, what's the perfect first food? And it doesn't matter. Truly, you can decide whatever you love to eat or whatever you want your baby to eat first. If it's in the right texture and the right format so that it's safe for baby, you can do it. So lots of families will use a kind of very thinned down cereal where you mix it with formula or express breast milk. Some families will do that with fruit or vegetable of your liking. It could be a peach, it could be mashed potato, it could be, truly anything that you want. Peas, it could be, any fruit, anything ground up in a blender to a nice puree where you can really thin it, because you want to test your baby's first food with a pretty easy to negotiated solid, meaning that it's going to be a new texture where they have to get it to the back of their throat. And then once you're off and running, the big key with all the new data on how we feed babies is that with all that whole food or all those fresh fruits and vegetables, that you don't go too slow. So we don't want you to just kind of tiptoe around foods and try one and wait a long time. In fact, that was our old advice. And what we found is that babies did not get diet diversity like we need. We know that with each increased kind of food group that your baby has regularly in early life, they decrease the likelihood of ever developing an allergic condition, things like asthma or eczema or, hay fever even, and food allergies. So we know the more diverse diet your baby has right out of the gates, the better. So you can start with a single food. If after 2 hours your child doesn't have a challenge with that food, it means they don't have a reaction to that food. You can introduce another one. A good rule of thumb in some ways is just making sure that you're introducing a new food every single day, but not waiting on foods that you've heard of that are common allergies. So common allergies you've probably heard of are peanut, dairy, egg. Those are some of the most common, but fish, shellfish, sesame, soy, oat, and wheat are some of the other ones. And you want to make sure that you're getting those into your baby's diet, not just early at 4 to 5 to 6 months, that you're incorporating those in, but regularly. When we look at the studies that have shown us that when babies eat these foods early in life, they're about 80% less likely to develop a food allergy to that food. Now, that specifically data comes out around peanut. They took high-risk babies, and a very important study was published in 2015, so 5 years ago, and changed everything about how we made recommendations. But they took high-risk babies with eczema, and they fed them peanut at least 3 times a week, peanut. So 4 months and up, they started feeding these babies who had eczema and even allergies to egg at the time. They fed them peanut at least 3 times a week. And they found that by the time these kids went to kindergarten, if they kept feeding them 3 times a week, all the way through infancy and preschool years and all the way up to kindergarten, those who were eating peanut regularly, they had an 80% less likelihood of ever developing an allergy to peanut in the first place. And those were the kids that we were really worried were going to develop that allergy. So we know it's not just about you kind of going, and getting these foods in once or twice, but it's really about making sure that as your baby's going through infancy, as your baby's going through toddlerhood and through their tantrums and through their phases, that, some days are good days, some days are hard days, but the goal is really to make sure that during each and every one of those days that your baby's tummy is getting exposed to all those different foods. And that's because the immune system is in your baby's tummy. About 70% of our immune system is actually in the lining of our mouth, esophagus, and into our intestines and things through our stomach. And what we want to make sure of is that like a little peanut protein's going there, and a little egg protein's going there, and a little tree nut protein's going there, and constantly, so that the immune system's like, oh yeah, I know this, and doesn't go down that pathway to develop an allergic condition in the first place. And so our founder at Spoonful One, so I work at Spoonful One as the chief medical officer. And ultimately, Spoonful One is a combination of 16 different foods. It's all wrapped up here using data that came out of Stanford University. So our founder is the head of allergy and immunology at Stanford. She's a medical doctor. She also has a PhD in protein biochemistry, and she's a mom of 5, which is kind of crazy. And she's married to a brain surgeon, which is also crazy. But she, was taking care of kids for years who had multiple food allergens and started to realize it wasn't just about peanut, but it was about getting all these different foods in regularly. So she took different studies and looking at different levels of proteins and feeding babies and kids them every single day for a year, and then drew their blood and found that the kids that ate all the foods together every single day were much less likely to develop an allergy. They were less allergy prone. And so she put together in Spoonful One 16 of the most common foods. So all the tree nuts, peanut, milk, eggs, soy, the 2 different kinds of fish, and even shrimp. They, used food engineers. We have an amazing chief of innovation, used food engineers to mask the flavors, make it taste a little bit more like a Cheerio. You can't really taste the fishiness. And then said, put this in baby's bottle right from the get-go at 4 to 6 months every day. Increase, all this diversity into your table foods, but know that on a daily basis. She wanted to make it really easy to make sure that if it was a good day of feeding or a hard day of feeding, that every day that tummy was getting exposed to all the most common allergenic foods. And the other thing is that she really wanted, in designing Spoonful One, the company to make sure that it was really for the long game, that, her research really followed kids for an entire year. And so we also have puffs, for example, and crackers where exact same amount of protein in this as in this, daily basically serving of 16 different foods to get that diet diversity and make it super convenient. So mom and dad and baby can make sure, or any partner, right? Anyone who's feeding your baby, they can kind of have the food day that they're going to have. But every single day, you're making sure you're getting all that good diet diversity. And so just like we know it's really good not to raise your baby in such a clean environment. You want your kids to play in the dirt. We know that, for example, babies who are raised in houses that have dogs are much less likely long-standing to develop allergies because the dog just brings in bacteria and fungus and dirt, and the baby's growing up, and that diversity, all that bacteria, all that diversity of what's called the microbiome, we know inside your intestine, but even on your skin is really good for you. And the philosophies around food are likely the same. Like, we want you to feel great about how you're feeding your baby and what you're feeding your baby, but making sure that you get all those foods in regularly is going to be really important. That we think, rather than having a doubling in the next decade of kids with food allergies, that by really making sure pediatricians and moms and dads together recognize that don't going too slow in introducing these foods, making sure you're introducing those common allergens, egg, milk, peanut, fish, shellfish early in life, and then keeping it in your baby's diet all throughout those early years will likely down-regulate the likelihood that a child develops an allergy, but also that we get rid of this doubling each decade. And we're hoping that the next generation of kids does not have the peanut allergies, does not have the milk or the shrimp or the cod allergies that we see today. So that's the philosophies on Spoonful One. I mean, your job as a parent, there's this beautiful pediatric nutritionist named Ellen Satter who always talks about the division of responsibility. And she says, it doesn't matter if, like me, you've got teenagers or you've got a baby, that a job of a parent is to be the provider of really good food. And the job of an infant or child is to choose what to eat and how much of that. And, Spoonful One is there so that as you go through that journey with food and you share your love of food with your kids, that you're always, during these really early years in this critical period of their immune development, making sure that what they're eating is exposing their immune system to all those proteins so that they stay super chill and tolerant of all those different foods. Think of a food that you love the very most and think of how important it might be for you to have a child who might enjoy that someday too. And part of how you're going to do that is to feed that food to your babies early and make sure you're feeding kind of this whole bouquet of different foods early and often. So you can learn more about Spoonful One, about the science around food allergies, and certainly the convenience that we're trying to create at Spoonful One at spoonfulone.com. I'm also on Instagram as just my name, Dr. Wendy Sue Swanson, and we'll answer any questions. And I know Stacy's probably here with me in the chat. I can never, for some reason, you guys find this chat very well. So let me just see if I'll go to the chat, see if I can navigate to it and see. I can never, maybe because I'm presenting, I can't do it, but let me know if there's any questions. Let me just see if she's texted me anything. Let me know if there's any questions I can answer right now, or Stacy can answer them, and we'll happily answer if you submit on our chat function on our website, or you can always drop us an email about the science or the solution. But again, 16 different foods. It's just food. There's nothing else in Spoonful One but food. And, it's just designed to be a super convenient factor for moms and dads to get diet diversity in their kids' diets every day and enjoy it. It's so fun to feed your babies. It's so fun to share the things that you love in your life. And once your baby shows those signs of readiness, game on. And so enjoy the feeding. So I think I'll wrap up there unless there are some questions. I can never see you guys. Let me just see. Oh, here we are. Let me just see if I'm there. I can't see any. So anyway, yeah, let me know. Thanks for having me so much. And don't hesitate to reach out. Dr. Wendy Sue Swanson on Instagram, and spoonfulone.com, or Spoonful One on Instagram too, and we'll happily answer your question. So thank you so much.